Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. I am absolutely delighted to kick off this first masterclass on leadership in a digital age, brought to you by the Future Skills Group of the Association of Consultancy and Engineering. That's a real mouthful, so I shall call it ACE, and I hope that's familiar for you. I'm Lara Potter. I lead workforce planning for Arcadis and I chair the Future Skills Group for ACE. And I'm joined today, perhaps if we could just move on to the next slide, please, Chetna. I'm joined today by hosts Andrew Henderson from Ramboll, Jane Grant from WSP and Claire Clifford from ACE, and we are supported by Chetna Goracia, also from ACE. We are also very lucky to be joined by a couple of guests, Emily Scoons from Ramboll and Stephen Hale from Crofton, who will introduce to you during the call. Chetna, would you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just before we kick off, a few housekeeping notes. I'm hoping that everybody is really familiar with Zoom by now. Just in case you're not, though, you can ask questions in the chat. And if you want to, you can ask those anonymously. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to wait until our Q&A session towards the end. Please just post your questions in as we go, and we will deal with them during the Q&A sessions. If we don't get to them, then we'll hope to deal with them afterwards, and we will send you the recording of this session over the next few days. So if you are wanting to share or go back, or if you can't attend the whole session, don't worry, it'll be there for you to view later on. So let's kick off. And just before I hand you over to Jane, who'll lead us through the session today, I just wanted to take a quick moment to set the scene. So you might have heard or come across the Future of Consultancy campaign, which ACE kicked off actually back about 18 months ago in 2019. There are quite a number of aspects to this work, including the application of technology, the use of data, changing business models, the shift to net zero, the client perspective, of course, and the skills, knowledge, and competencies required in order to create a sustainable and progressive future. The Future Skills Group has been established to explore those areas, and in this year, in 2021, we've got 4 work streams. We're looking at thought leadership in this area, helping our membership really understand the context around changing skills and competencies. We're also focused very importantly on early careers and apprenticeships. We have a project around career pathways. Our members tell us that career pathways are changing, and we want to really help out and shape our understanding around that. And then the 4th work stream is all around leadership in a digital age, an absolutely critical part of us being able to lead through change and apply technology into everything that we do in this built environment sector. So on that note, that's all the introduction I want to do. On that note, I'm going to hand you over to Jane Grant, who will lead you through the session today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks very much, Jane.
Thanks, Lara. So as Lara outlined, the purpose of the series is to, as it says on the slide, bring people together who have and are navigating the skills and challenges by our ever-evolving digital landscape. This is our kick-off session from this group, and we will be reminding you again at the end that there will be a series of masterclasses after today, one each on people, technology, and then clients, because we realise that these 3 areas are all impacted in terms of leadership in a digital age. So we're going to outline that programme, and also we're going to be seeking lots of engagement from you today to shape those coming sessions, and we really want to hear your perspective, and so we can do some deep dive into those challenges. We'll also be, as Lara said, welcoming some guest speakers today to really stimulate that conversation. So I would reiterate again, if you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat box and we'll pick them up. If you can move on to the next slide, Chetna, thank you. So to embrace digital today, we're going to use a technology called Mentimeter. And this is going to gather your questions and feedback on very specific areas, specific questions we're going to ask you. It's also a bit of fun and interactive for all. So how you can access Mentimeter, and we're going to try it out in a moment by asking the first question, is much as if you were going out for dinner and doing your track and trace. You can hold your phone up and take a photo of the QR code on the screen now, and that will take you through to Menti on your phone. Or you can access via Mentimeter via the www.menti.com in a separate window on your computer, and the code is there for you, 89368334, and that code will be on each one of the Menti slides when I switch to it in a moment. So if you don't quite manage to get that down, it will be on the screen in just a moment for you as well. So if I can ask you all to try and access the survey now, and I will then try and do the clever thing of sharing my screen. And thank you, Chetna. It's taken it off for me so I can share my screen and hopefully come into my slides for you. Here we go. So you should be able to see my slides. I'm just going to go back. I'm just going to refine my slides for you so that, there we go. So you should all be able to see my slides now. Mentimeter, can I have a thumbs up from one of my fellow presenters that you can see my Mentimeter?
Yes, Jane, we've got it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Looks
okay. And this will be open for the next 2 weeks. So if you're taking part in the session today and you want to go back and reflect on any of the questions we asked you today, and indeed any of the results, this will stay open for another 2 weeks, but we'll also be sending you the results. So to ask you your first question, some of you are already into it. How prepared do you currently feel to lead your business through digital transformation? So if you could vote now, please, and you will see that the results will come up on the screen as you're all entering your votes. Any more votes? So it looks like we have a bit of a split. We have some people who feel quite good or fully prepared, so it'd be great to get their insights later. And we have a few people who feel kind of a bit less prepared, perhaps a little bit of preparation, but not much at the moment. So, but we have quite a good split there. So thank you for sharing those results. And we're now going to do that back to the studio bit where I switch back to Chetna. Chetna's going to bring up the next slide. Okay, so if you could bring up the next slide, Chetna. So it now delights me to introduce to you Emily. Emily Scroons was recently awarded the Best Woman in Digital Innovation at the 2020 WICE Awards. She's a chartered structural computational design engineer, gosh that's a mouthful, Emily, and a senior consultant at Ramboll. She combines her engineering knowledge and digital design skills to create great solutions that are creative and add value to projects, clients and society. And she plays an integral role in the creation and delivery of SiteSolve, a new generative design tool for residential building developments that unlocks the potential of available land, increases cost certainty and return on investment. So Emily has kindly agreed to come and talk to us today to give us the kind of in-house digital experience. So over to you, Emily.
Great, thanks, Jane. Yeah, thank you for that introduction and good afternoon to everyone attending, depending on where you are in the world. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the sort of journey that I've gone through to get to where I am today, but kind of taking the approach of looking back on it with a little bit of a hindsight lens to allow me to kind of extract some of those sort of successes, challenges, and learnings that I've faced throughout this career so far, and hopefully being able to share these with you to maybe allow individuals or you guys leading companies to consider the way that you're sort of thinking about these digital problems, approaching them, and how we can encourage an even better environment that's conducive to sort of promoting and creating innovation and digital transformation. So if you go to the next slide, please, Chetna. So when I first started my career, I was actually aiming to be a structural engineer, and I was doing everything in my power to take those stepping stones to, you know, go along that career path, doing internships, applying to be an ICE Quest Scholar, all of these kinds of things. And if I'm honest, I didn't actually at that time know so much about the digital work that was going on, what was possible in the industry. And I actually happened to stumble upon this track completely by chance. And I think this is an area that I think a lot of the industry knows that we need to work on, both in terms of what we do in the industry in general, but also what career paths and what amazing things is digital transformation doing in our industry, and promoting it that at, you know, a school, university level, to encourage people to take a little bit more of a slightly different, diverse career path, or to see that it is possible to not do necessarily everything that we've been trained for the past however many years to do. Next slide, please. So once I found that about this thing, I actually decided and was given the opportunity to go out to a course in Germany, which at least initially I was very skeptical about going towards. And this was predominantly because it was taking me off this traditional career path. And I didn't know how it was going to affect, you know, how I was going to get promoted. Would this affect how I could get chartered with the ICE? All of these kind of concerns, as well as moving to a different country and all of these kinds of things. But actually, it was through the support of Ramble, who had supported me for a few work experiences at that time, who showed me the support that I needed to take that jump and take that leap to try something new and try something different. And here I got this amazing opportunity to work with architects, computer scientists, biologists, roboticists, and to learn a whole new series of skills, from coding through to how to work with industrial robots, how to work with material that I'd never even seen before. But actually the most important learning here that I took away from this was how to actually fail and to learn from these failures, of which prior to that, I'd been a complete perfectionist, if I'm honest. And it was very difficult for me to not create something until it was completely finished, completely perfect. But now through this course, I learned that actually it was okay to try and do these little tests, things to go wrong, and to learn from that and build that up as you went forward. So next slide, please. So as I then moved into Ramble and into my industry career, I wanted to try and bring as much of these learnings as I could back as possible, not just the skill set that I'd learned in coding and how to create apps and the likes, but also how to approach problems in a way that was slightly different from how I had previously. And actually, when I first started at Ramble, I was given opportunities both to work on traditional engineering projects, learning how to be a sort of more traditional structural engineer, but also to do work on digital projects at the same time. So if you go to the next slide, please. And actually what was really interesting is that I was given a certain amount of time per week to work on whatever I wanted, to bring ideas that I had from the industry, hear what other people were doing, to see if I could solve problems that they had by using those digital skill sets. And this gave me a real kind of autonomy and purpose on ideas that were completely free of specific projects, for example. And although I didn't quite realize it at the time, this was something similar to a new technique that a lot of sort of software companies are developing, which is these things called FedEx days. And the idea here is it's some sort of motivation theory where for 24 hours, once a month, once a year, the whole company goes off and the employees have 24 hours, or some companies do it for less time, to develop and deliver something that's not related to what they're doing completely. And they are using this to try and drive and promote innovation that may not have materialized if employees stuck to that day job. And that's an opportunity that I was given, similar, not quite with the same deadlines, but that an opportunity that I was given as part of my starting at Ramble to try and make a difference. And I did a lot of work in interoperability personally, but that was where it is. But that was a very interesting thing that I found now looking at it in hindsight, that it's something that a lot of, especially tech companies, are looking at in different ways of working to promote motivation and to increase the innovation that they're bringing. Next slide, please. So throughout my career, I have sort of started off by developing a whole series of digital tools. Some of them are little apps which have been used to sort of automate some of the engineering design process that us engineers do on a day-to-day, in the day-to-day design process. And the idea here is not just to make what we do faster, but also to add additional value into what we're doing and what we can offer to clients. The additional speed means that we can do more coordination, allow for more designs to be tested in order to create better ideas and better solutions overall. After creating these kind of apps, I've sort of moved into developing these sort of digital platforms where you're able to build in a whole series of constraints, both sort of engineering knowledge that you can see on the right-hand side from building over a railway, so what was needed in terms of geotechnical, bridge engineering and structural engineering, but also building constraints around the railway, so things for health and safety, etc., in order to try and explore the solution space, and whenever you make changes to design, instantly be able to see the impact and whether all of the constraints were still being met. Next slide, please. And the one thing that was really important in all of these is that the project was set up in a way that allowed for innovation to happen. And this meant that the project manager and the way that it was scheduled had been designed in a way that it realized that innovation does take a time sink at the beginning, whether that be in terms of time, resource, money, in order to happen. And that's a different mindset from maybe in comparison to how traditional consultancy projects are delivered at the moment. And because of this change in the mindset of the way the project was being delivered, it allowed for this innovation to happen, which initially maybe created the sink, but it meant that by the end of the project, or even further afield, it meant that we were able to utilize all the great things that we developed on it and use it in even faster speed, create even greater value. Next slide, please. So as Jane was saying, I am now a member of a team that is developing a tool called SiteSolve, a generative design tool which aims to try and help residential development massing and using generative design, computational power to create ideas for potential massing options for developers on residential sites. The idea here is that we can incorporate loads of different evaluation criteria from both, cost and value, but also consider things such as views or other sort of social and environmental factors, all at that really early design stage, so that we can try and start to get the ideas right from the start. And as part of this team, I've not only been developing part of the code base that has created the platform, but also been creating sort of the commercial ideas, speaking to clients, and creating whole new business offerings that we can take to market, and the business model that is applying to Ramboll. Next slide, please. An example of one of these completely new sort of business offerings that we now have are these kind of mass land viability studies that simply would not have been possible without the use of this technology. So for example, we did this for Transport for London relatively recently, where they wanted to look at over 2,000 plots of land to understand them, to help them to get a holistic overview and understand which of the sites would help to unlock certain amounts of housing and where they should invest. And to achieve this, we really needed to use our SiteSolve technology, adapt it to the specific methodology, collaborate with other companies and work with digital ways to transfer data in order to give the client as much detail as possible and help them to create these kind of dashboards that allowed them to get a holistic viewpoint of their whole portfolio, but also drill down into the sites that had the most potential to understand what could be achieved on each of those, so that they could make strategic decision-making with way more data and in way less time than you could have done by hand. Next slide, please. So as part of developing SiteSolve, our team went through an innovation accelerator, and this is a process which is designed to help to develop and test innovation ideas in a way sort of similar, where you learn sort of lean startup methodology. So we act a little bit like a startup within Ramboll itself. And what was really interesting here was about the change of perspective. We have a team of hugely talented people, and we had an idea of what our tool initially should be. And we had started developing, creating prototypes, but we heard a lot of these sort of horror stories of all these companies, all these people that had spent millions of pounds and years developing a product that when they then went to market, the clients turned around and said, oh, that's very cool, but actually it's not something that we want, or it's not something that we would pay for. And actually, it really changed the mindset of the way that we approached our development of SiteSolve. So we started to create a lot more sort of miniature tests where we went and really made clients the center of our design process to really understand their problems in a way where we couldn't put our own biases and our own understanding of what we've done in the industry onto them. And what it meant is that we could learn, build, measure, and constantly be adapting our process to really create a tool that clients really wanted and needed. And this is something that, going back to sort of the perfectionist point also, was that often with engineering or developing a solution is that you try and come up with the best solution before you bring it back. And something that we learned is that actually it's an iterative process throughout the whole of your design process, and that actually you should be constantly testing, constantly going back, asking the questions to make sure that you never go down a rabbit hole and you're always staying on top of what's important to your clients and developing a solution that's really can be usable by all. Next slide, please. So sort of in conclusion, I now look back a little bit in terms of what is the new team that I envision the industry could be made up of. And obviously there is little niches and more specifics, but broadly there are three areas that I think that there is. There's the traditional domain experts, the people that are predominantly here in the industry at the moment. On the other end, there's the new domain experts that we're going to require. These are the sort of software developers, but also people that have the new and different sort of legal, sales and marketing approaches that we don't necessarily have in a different mindset that we need to bring in, or at least to train some other people to have a new way of approaching it. And the middle bit is what I call the hybrids. Some people call them the translators. I've heard many names for them. And these are the people that have their feet in a little bit of both. They maybe have a bit of an idea of what the sort of traditional domain expertise is, but maybe they also have some of the experience of coding and software development. And there's three main parts, I think, that are at play here in order to both attract and retain all these three different areas of talent. The first one, I think, is sort of team dynamics and communication. With all of these new different types of people coming in, there's going to be a lot more diverse sort of ways of working, ways of sort of communicating that we need to consider. And actually what's really unhelpful is that between software development and the architecture and consultancy engineering industry is there's a lot of common words that mean completely different things in both of them. So I think there might need to be a new language that's created. But this is really where the hybrids come into play, being able to communicate between the various different domain experts and work together to try and come up with the solutions in order to really create those things that are required. There is another piece which is around salary, which is slightly interesting. And as we sort of look out into other industries, there is a distinct difference between the salaries in different types of domain expertise. And that will need to be considered in the future. And I think that is important, but I think it's also to understand people's whys. Domain experts, although they're software engineers, etc., they love problem solving. So I think we really have to promote the way that our PR of the industry to promote exactly what impact you can have by having this new career path. And that's the last piece that I'd like to touch upon is the career path. With the traditional domain experts and the new domain experts, it's quite simple. The stepping stones are in place. We might need to use them. We might need to look in other industries to see how those progress, but they are possible. But for the hybrids, I know from personal experience that sometimes it can feel a little bit like a roller coaster. As you're gaining experience in one sector than the other, it can sometimes feel like you're not necessarily progressing. And there's a little bit of consideration that needs to happen around how we develop and create career paths for these new different people and new different parts of the team. So in sort of summary, I think there's a lot of progress being made in a lot of these areas. And I think there are still challenges that we face, but I hope that maybe my story of how I've kind of got to where I am now has sparked some ideas of ways that we can tackle some of these issues. And I look forward to answering some of your questions in the Q&A session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily. That was absolutely fascinating. I took lots away from it, as I'm sure everybody else did. And some of my key takeaways was, I loved when you said I had to learn how to fail, moving away from perfectionism. That really resonated with me. And also that those FedEx days, those times to think, I think that's really key, is having that space to think. And SiteSolve looks fascinating, and I'm quite sure you're going to get lots of questions in the chat box for the end of the session. So thank you so much for your time and for putting that presentation together. It's really appreciated. Thank you, Emily. We're going to move on now, if that's okay. And move to our next question on Mentimeter. So like before, if you've joined the session since the start, if you scan that QR code, it takes you into our polling questions, Mentimeter. So Chetna, if we can do the lovely swap again, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And I will try and do that as smoothly as I possibly can. So here we go. And we'll move you on to the next question in Mentimeter. Okay. Let me just move it on if I can. There we go. So the next question I'd like to ask you is, where do you go for support in guiding your company with structured ways of working in the digital arena? And this is a free text question, so you can type pretty much anything you like in the responses. But where do you currently go for support in guiding your company in that digital arena? So we'd really like to find out from you, what is your current network that you tap into as well. And this will set us up nicely for our next presenter as well. So if you can type those into the response, that'd be fantastic. Sorry, let me go back. Okay. It's got a few responses coming through. I'm just giving you time to use those fingers on your on the phones and things, because I know it's not always easy to type them that quickly. So we've got digital community, these types of sessions as a couple of the answers. And what else have we got coming through? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause that, and then, oh, here we go. Here's lots more coming through all of a sudden. So hopefully you can see those answers as well. So we've got some internal digital leads, LinkedIn. Yep, I look at articles there. Universities. Yep, having MSc or PhD students is great. Seeing what competitors use. Digital steering group, BIM team. Lots of different ideas there for where you go to get your digital information at the moment. Fantastic, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to move on to our speaker, but that sets us up nicely for our next speaker as well. So Chetna, if you could bring up our next slide, please. So we're now going to, with that in mind, introduce you to a bit of an interview session. So we're delighted to be joined by Stephen Hale from Crofton Consulting. He's kindly offered to be interviewed by Andrew Henderson, one of our other members of our group today, looking at digital from a leadership and investment perspective. What are the successes, what are the challenges, what are the pitfalls into investing as a leader of a consultancy group in digital. So I'll let Stephen and Andrew take it away for an interview session. Thank you both. Thank you.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for putting yourself under the microscope this afternoon. So I'm going to start by telling you something you don't want to hear. We've known each other for 30 years now, Steve, in the industry. So that's a long time. And what's good about that is we've managed to stay in touch and compare notes on the industry. So we've had a bit of a parallel journey. Now, I went off to the big consultancies and you went off to start your own business. Yep. So quite a different journey in that respect. But more recently, we've come together to compare notes on digital leadership, challenges of launching products. So I wanted to start by asking you to tell us about your product and your product that you have and that you've been working on for the last period.
Yeah, so unusual, I guess, for an SME firm of consulting engineers, we took the decision to invest in product design rather than sort of service design. And we started playing around with what at the time was Google's Tango initiative, which was their first sort of go at providing augmented reality for mobile devices. That's now morphed into what's called AR Core. What we thought we could do, so that initiative put sort of time of flight depth sensors, so a LiDAR, into a mobile phone. What we thought we could do was grab hold of that data at the sort of hardware level and use it to develop point clouds, so to replace a commercial grade sort of laser scanner with a mobile phone. So we pursued that quite hard. We came up with a working product, and that's out at the moment on the Google Play Store in beta. So essentially what we're trying to do is replace a commercial grade laser scanner with an app that goes on your phone for the price of a cup of coffee, so that can be put into every operative in the construction supply chain. We've had a few hiccups since those days. We had a great product then, but it required specialist hardware. Google pulled all of that, and we're currently back to about that sort of place on their new AR Core platform, having worked through the challenges that Google threw at us.
So it's an unusual journey, and I'm interested because I think people will be interested in the sort of the timeline that it takes to take a product to get it close, but also that, you know, for an SME, money's always a challenge, both in making it and collecting it. So give us some quantities and sort of time of the journey, and also the kind of investment that you've made to date. I know that might be a cold thing to want to reflect on, but it'll be useful, I think.
So we've been on this journey for about 4 years. It took us, technically, what we're trying to do is sort of at the edge of what's capable on mobile devices. Maybe that was a hard decision to take. So it took us about 18 months to get that first product ready. We got that out into the market, and that's a dedicated team. So I've got a dedicated software development team in-house. So that's one person full-time and then one part-time that who also works on other stuff, but also quite a bit of my time. And then it's taken us another couple of years to get almost back to where we were initially, following Google changing the goalposts. So it's been a 4-year journey, and I think we've probably spent just over £200,000 getting to that place, which quite honestly would have been really welcome as we've come into the pandemic.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the proof's in the pudding later on, isn't it? But let's come back to that. So, I mean, one of the many challenges of being entrepreneurial is your own self-belief in what you're doing, and sometimes it overrides your sense of reality. So the question I have is how close do you think you are now to realizing your original ambition?
So I think we're back to the place where we've got an internal alpha product, and subject to a few final tweaks, we will be releasing publicly over the summer our product onto the Google Play Store in beta. A good thing about that is the changes that Google have made and the work that we've done allows you to use any mobile phone that supports Google's AR Core depth API. So that gives us 1 billion devices worldwide to play at, rather than a few tens of thousands with the specialist hardware we had before. So we're tantalizingly close, is the way I would put that.
Well, I can't wait for the summer for many, many reasons, actually. So, right. So, yeah, I mean, for an SME business to be operating in this way, I find remarkable, and I take my hat off to you. But so you've got a real strong business strategy that really is around investing in digital. So, are the outcomes and benefits that you want to leverage? You know, what do you actually want to get from this at the end? I mean, you talked about a cup of coffee, but you can't make money out of coffee.
We want to. Well, you can if you're selling 1 billion of them, Andy, can't you? So, and we only need to sell a few tens of thousands of them to be able to turn that into a good business, actually. But our view was many years ago that the professional service world is becoming more and more commoditized. Yeah, it's the professional service work that we do that adds the added sort of social value, you know, designing assets and creating the assets that the wider economy uses, that's really kind of adds that social value. So we thought that we needed to change our business model to generate additional income streams that supported that professional service side of the firm. And the thought process we went through was, well, the way that we work at the moment, the intellectual property walks out the door every Friday night. Sometimes it goes off to a competitor, and quite often when they do that, they take some of the sort of uniqueness of you with them. So we wanted to develop intellectual property that we retained ownership for. We've got a patent pending on this product, which we've been pursuing for a while, currently in the UK, the EU and America. So yeah, it's about using our intellectual assets to generate intellectual property that we retain, and then in the same way that a tech startup would, quite honestly, then using that to gain investment so that you've got a second income stream that then supports the professional service side of the firm. So that's the thought process of the journey.
So 4 years is a good enough period of time to be bruised by the whole experience. So my next question's in two parts, really. What's the most important lesson you've learned from the journey? And the second part of it is, what single piece of advice would you give to people that are in the midst of a product journey or are actually setting out on a product journey?
Yeah, so we've had to stay quite faithful to it, really. We could have just given up sort of 2.5 years ago when Google canned Tango in favour of AR Core. But we made some mistakes early on. We tried to use the wrong type of software development team and buy in software developers. That didn't work for us very early on. So we had to go and find some, software developers that could work in-house. So that was an interesting challenge. Fortunately, I've got a bit of a coding background myself from a sort of early part of my career. So I was able to kind of work through that. And you definitely get into that sort of typical valley of despair curve where you get the rush of excitement at the beginning, and the valley of despair is that moment where you've really got to keep the faith and believe in the journey. Not only that the product's the right product, but B, that the business model that you're sort of attaching to that product is the right thing, really. And in some ways it's a bit easier in an SME, because if you believe as the sort of business owner, you know that you don't have anyone else to go and convince, do you? So in a sort of larger firm, perhaps what we've done might have got scrapped, but maybe I'm wrong there.
So I mean, there's a vast difference between the SMEs and larger companies in terms of scale of investment and also the scale of resources they have. So for an SME to be able to take this product to market, and you're very close, it's fantastic. So I'm interested in how intrinsic the key individuals in your organization are. I also want to understand, in an SME where you've tried to retain those people, have you had to morph your operating model? And then the last piece is, have you anything around retention, because you're highly invested now. So how have you looked after these people to keep them in your business?
Yeah, so we give them a lot of freedom to experiment. I think that's probably, and also get involved in that experimentation as the leader as well. I personally quite enjoy playing around with sort of new stuff. And as I say, I've got a bit of a sort of coding background, and I think I've benefited in my education from that very short period of time when the government was investing in sort of computer skills rather than IT skills at school with the BBC Micro and things. So I had a benefit there. So I've got sort of an experimental kind of approach to things, and we've given freedom to those guys to have that experimental approach, and with a bit of sort of control. We'd like you to focus over there, but go and do it in whichever way you like. so it's been finding people that want to be involved in that experimental journey, actually giving them the freedom, and also, you know, ultimately giving them a piece of the pie at the end. So they're a bit invested in the product because they can see some financial benefit from them. So the way that we've structured the business model for launching this product to the market. So I think that's helped to keep them. And I think getting them has been just offering them something that they enjoy, really.
I think that's probably an advantage of an SME, actually, that you can structure your business model, whereas PLCs and other organisations probably find it quite difficult to be flexible. So I do agree with you, actually. I think you could do it. So, I mean, I no doubt, you know, funding's been a challenge, especially for an SME. With the benefit of a time machine, if you went back to the beginning, is there a different funding route you could have followed? Is there a different path you've learned to take? Yeah,
almost certainly. We had the offer of some seed funding from a VC back when we had a viable product under the original sort of Google Tango initiative. And I think that was about 150,000 quid from, I won't mention the name of the investor, but it was a university-based sort of investment vehicle. And we would have got some access to some academics at that time. We felt we had a better product, actually, so we were probably a little bit arrogant about what we had and felt that we needed a bit more money. So I think actually what we should have done was jumped on the sort of external funding train at that moment in time, sort that, and then use somebody else's money to help us to develop it. But also gained access to the expertise that they could bring around developing technology products and launching them to market, because that's certainly an area that we've got a weakness in, I would say.
Okay, good stuff. So this does rely on creative people. You talked about, you know, yourself and your own ambitions, but it's more of an interesting question for SMEs and competing. I mean, you know, Emily works in a large organisation. They've done certain things and flexed certain things to help her on her journey. But how do SMEs start to compete with the bigger players for that talent that's going to drive these products, you know, that the industry so desperately needs?
I think actually we've all got a problem. I've got an insight in my sort of personal life, and Emily kind of alluded to it earlier with the salary piece. Because my son works in sort of data science, and the sort of salaries that are expected in those sort of organisations far outstrip the sort of salaries that a consultancy firm is able to support. And I think that's an issue for all of us, small, large, medium, across the piece. As I say, we've been fortunate enough to be able to attract some people locally. We struggled in London, actually. We've got offices in Kent and in London, but we were not able to attract anyone in London because, you know, the labour market is open to so many people. We were fortunate enough in our regional office to be able to find the right individual. And maybe SMEs need to compete by thinking about where there's a sort of slightly thinner employment opportunity for some of those creatives and employing them in that way. And maybe the pandemic's given us a bit of an opportunity because location's a little bit less important for us. But yeah,
I think you might be right. I think certainly we're all wrestling with hybrid working and flexible working now. And maybe there's an opportunity as people are more attracted to regional opportunities. So I can see that. So that's, yeah. So how do you, I mean, one question I've got really is around, could your product inside a larger organization have been different or gone faster? I mean, you mentioned it could have been canned, but did you ever feel that you were struggling to go fast enough?
I think we probably needed additional development. So we've got, our software team has got to, which is largely, as I say, one person and another person part-time, has got to be working on the user interface. It's got to be working on the underlying core technology that so you've got sort of multiple sort of things in the sort of software pipeline that could have been worked on simultaneously, and sometimes a third party to bounce a problem off of. We've not solved problems as quickly as I would have liked, actually. So you hit a roadblock, and then you're kind of looking at academic research and how you're going to get through that, or you're looking on Google's Code Labs to work out how they've approached it, etc., etc., etc. And then all of a sudden the light bulb comes up and you move forward to the next piece, and you come against another roadblock. So I think we probably could have done with another one and maybe two people in that team that would have pushed us forward a lot faster. But because we're funding that from cash flow, I mean, we couldn't afford it. As simple as that, really.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions that you can only answer yes or no. And we've been talking for years, Steve, about the so-called digital revolution. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you've got a yes or no answer. So has the much predicted digital revolution reached our industry yet?
No.
Do you think it's coming anytime soon?
Yes.
Okay. And are you ready?
In part.
Okay, good. Steve, really, really appreciate you sharing your insights. And I'm sure people can ask lots of questions, and you're a valuable resource, actually. Lots of people think they have a product. Lots of people think they can go to market and go mainstream. And yeah, I think your 4-year journey has been really, really relevant. And I want to wish you really well. And I hope the launch in the summer goes to plan. Okay, so much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen and Andrew. That was brilliant. And there's a couple of key phrases that I will certainly take away, which is one is that your intellectual property potentially walks out the door every Friday night. And the other one that I thought was fascinating was about the value of despair is believing in the journey. So some great takeaways for all of us. And do remember to keep putting your questions in the chat box. Claire is having a look through them and lining them all up for us in a moment, but we're just going to briefly switch back to Mentimeter. So Chetna and I are going to do our swap, which so far, I hate to say it, has gone quite smoothly. So we'll carry on trying to do that. So we've got a few more questions for you, and this is to set us up for ensuring we bring all of your thoughts into our masterclasses that are going to be coming up shortly. So some of you have started answering this. So the first one is, do you feel you're utilizing technology to make your business digitally competitive for the future? We've got a resounding somewhat at the moment. So kind of quite a few people getting splinters sitting on that fence. But I think that's because we all feel we're kind of dipping our toe in the water a little bit at the moment. And I think Steve and Emily's talks were kind of alluding to that as well. So we have all the votes in for somewhat. So I'm going to move on to the next question, but you can keep voting on those questions as this poll is up, as I say, for the next 2 weeks. So all of them somewhat on that one. So our next question is, I can move on to the next one. So thinking of the people in your organisation, what have you done so far in terms of securing skills and knowledge? And this is a free text question, so you can type in what your responses are. And just a few words in your response if you can. So it's really thinking about what Steve just said and about securing those skills. How might you have done that? What are you thinking about in terms of those people in your organisation and what you might have done so far in your journey to secure those skills and knowledge? And I was really interested when Steve was talking about some of those items around retention, and he didn't he mentioned salary in terms of right at the end, but some of those key things he was mentioning were around, freedom to experiment, leaders accepting their approach and giving them a piece of the pie at the end. So I think there's some really interesting things coming out of our approach in securing skills and knowledge. So we've got a few answers coming in. So attending training, promoting youth, Not enough, but developing new roles in software development. Okay. Defining new career paths. Okay. Encouraging diversity of thought. Yep, that's a brilliant one. Thank you. Gathering individuals to network and share knowledge. Yeah, I think that's a really key one, isn't it? Getting your thought leaders in this area all into one space and allowing them to have those sessions where they can do that. So some great answers about what you've been doing, and hopefully you can all look at those and think, get ideas from each other about what you're doing at the moment, what you've done so far. I love that one, training on a context of digital transformation. Yeah, in threading it into everything that we do. Okay, so we've got more questions, so I'm going to move on because I want to leave some time for our Q&A at the end. So again, challenging your thoughts. So what specific skill or capability are you seeking in order to make better use of those digital solutions? So have you thought about, right, okay, we've got a gap in this area. What is our specific skill or specific capability that we're going to need in the short, medium or long term in order to make better use of digital solutions in our businesses going forward? So I'd be really interested to hear about your thoughts on that and where your business has got to in thinking about those specific skills or capabilities. So if you can again write a few answers in the free text. And as I say, we will be giving you all the results of the poll, so you'll get all of these thoughts afterwards in our follow-up with the recordings and everything else, so you'll be getting them. Here we go, some answers coming through now. Client understanding. Okay, yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Understanding what your clients want going forwards. Creativity. It's interesting because whenever I do talks with STEM with schools, we always talk about creativity rather than maths, because maths puts a lot of students off. Creativity brings them into our industry. So it's really interesting to see that we've got creativity there as one of the specific skills that we're going to be seeking going forward. Ensuring that thinking time. Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? Again, we've got client needs there. Lots of few things around clients. Programming, yeah, and I think that's something we haven't necessarily looked at. Programmers, data visualization, coding. You know, it's really interesting to see data scientists. It's really interesting to see the range of skills and behaviours that we've got there that we're going to need in our industry going forward, and we're going to need to bring out in our existing cohorts. So thank you very much for those answers. We've got a couple more questions, if you can bear with us. So another free text one. So we would love to hear your ideas on what you have seen in terms of your clients' expectations of your digital capabilities and how these have changed. So building on those answers you've just given us, because quite a few people said about clients in that skills space. What have you seen in terms of your clients' expectations, in terms of your digital capabilities and how these have changed? So what are your clients telling you that they want? And out of the conversations you're having with your clients, what do you think their needs are? Okay, so we've got a few answers coming through. Thank you for being very quick on the draw. So we've got significant expectation on productivity improvement. Okay, that's really interesting. 3D interactive models of structures, and we saw a bit of that in that product that Emily was showing us, didn't we? Discrete solutions. Okay, that's a really interesting one as well. Thank you very much. Expect more for the same cost. I think that kind of links with that significant expectation on productivity improvement, doesn't it? And an understanding of net zero. Yeah. I mean, net zero is a phrase that is said a lot, but how do we get our clients to really understand that, and how can we explain that to them in really clear ways and then enact it? And then, yeah, concise solution, presentation to complex problems. I think that's a really great one, because it's always been a case of how do we present really complex design solutions in a very clear way to our clients that somebody who's not technical in an engineering space can understand. And we've got, about tracking of documents and digitally signed documents. Yeah. And I'm sure quite a lot of the big companies are doing quite a lot on digital signing of documents, but that's another great way that we can digitize experiences. Okay, brilliant. I'm going to move on, but please put more in there if you would like to. So moving on to the next one. What are your concerns, if any, about meeting your clients' digital requirements? So what is keeping you awake at night, if you like? Hopefully not literally, but what are the things that are really occupying you in terms of those concerns about meeting your clients' digital requirements? What are they saying to you that they want, and what are you concerned about in terms of meeting that? You know, for example, do you think they have got really big thoughts about really big demands about what they want from us as an industry, and how we're going to meet those? So it'd be really great to capture those concerns. And as I say, don't forget, all of these outputs are going to help us to shape those masterclasses for you that are coming up, so we can really make sure we are keying into those concerns that you have, those observations that you have, so that we can design those masterclasses to fit what you need. Okay, lack of understanding, lack of direction. Okay, these great, thank you for your honesty. Truly understanding them. Yep, brilliant, thank you. We don't have the expertise. Yeah, that's a concern, isn't it? And I think that's shared by most companies, most firms at the moment, is really thinking about, do we have the expertise we need? Do we know what those expertise are? Can we define them? Reward structure, that's a great one, following on from Steve's talk, and about, you know, the pay structure for those data analysts and how we go about retaining them, and their expectations, you know, just in general, the big expectations of your clients. This is brilliant. Thank you so much for all of this. This is coming in thick and fast. Fantastic. Training, innovation risks. So there's clearly many concerns, but we can pick up on those and talk to those in the masterclass on clients that's coming up soon. Okay. And last but not least, how comfortable are you leading on digital solutions for your business? So this is a multiple choice question, so I'll give you some time off of writing all of that text in, but how comfortable do you feel about leading those digital solutions in your business? This is just for us to get a pulse check on how you're feeling about that, so we can pitch things at the right level for you. So we've got some that are fully confident, one person. We've got some somewhat again. Okay, not at all. Thank you for your honesty, the not at all. But we've got some really good answers coming in there about just how comfortable you're feeling about leading those digital solutions for your business. Brilliant, thank you. So that's a really good indication of where people are feeling and their potential comfort level. So thank you. And what we're going to do now is we're going to switch back to the main screen, so that we can open the floor up for some questions and answers. And I've got some questions that have been coming in. So I know we're running right up against time, but I'm going to just ask some questions in the hope that people can stay on and listen to some of the answers. But as I say, as Lara said at the beginning, we will look at the questions and come back to you with some answers afterwards as well. So the first question I have is for Emily, if that's okay, Emily. The question is, what are the key skills leaders should develop to be able to nurture future digital skills and talent? So what are those key skills that leaders need to develop and nurture? If I can ask Emily, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think there's two. I think one is communication. You know, there's going to be different kinds of people, but I think the slightly more interesting one is maybe, at least initially, letting go of your own experiences. that you've had before, and creating that space where you at least initially accept everything as it goes, allow people to test things on a very small MVP quick level, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think even me, the digital space is changing so quickly that I look at people coming in and some of the ideas I wouldn't necessarily follow, but I think it's worth hearing those ideas initially.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emily. So one for Steve, if that's okay, Steve. How do you influence the clay layer to come along with you?
That's the biggest problem that we've had, actually, and I have to say we failed there, and we found that a number of those people that were uncomfortable with that journey have left us. Now that's kind of okay for an SME because we've been able to replace them with people that are keen to come along on that journey. But as the industry, that clay layer is definitely very important for the sector, and we've got to work out how we can bring them along the journey, but otherwise we will lose those skills. So sadly we failed to bring them along. Maybe we were moving too quickly for them, but as a sector we've got to work out how we can bring them along better.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're going to be looking at some of that sort of change leadership in our first of our masterclasses. So that's great insight. Thank you. One more for Steve, if you don't mind me coming back to you a second time, Steve. We've got lots of questions for you. A question from the audience says, are we too late to get started?
Oh God, no. I mean, that's almost like saying, is there any knowledge out there? Have we discovered all the knowledge? I mean, we're just literally scratching the surface. I take it, the analogy I give is that we've spent, our digital journey's probably been 8 or 9 years now, and we've spent 8 or 9 years learning how to drive the car, pass the driving test, get the car and be insured, and we're literally just jumping in the car and beginning the journey. So yeah, we've just scratched the surface, really, I think.
Okay, brilliant. One more question, Lara, is that okay? I know we're over time.
I think maybe just one more, because I think we are over time now, and I know people need to get off and do their lunch and other things. So thanks, Jane. Yeah.
One more for Steve. It's because we've got so many great questions. I'm very tempted. Steve, one more for you if I can. Somebody said a key point raised by you is relating to attracting and developing digital talent. How can we compete in the war on talent and attract key people into our industry going forward?
So thinking about it from the consultancy side, I think we've got to get rid of layers of bureaucracy. I think we do too much in our sector that's bureaucratic, that creates a skill shortage just by its very nature, because you get 2 people to do one person's job. So we've certainly got to solve that issue. On the digital side, we've got to, I think it's just about creating the excitement of a startup. I mean, if you're of a certain type, you want to be involved in that sort of environment, and you're kind of willing, particularly at a sort of certain age in your career, to take that risk that you get from a startup. And something that Emily said, the sort of old hands like me do need to learn to think about things in a slightly different way, and perhaps create a culture where you're trading knowledge rather than trying to push knowledge down, because there's certainly things that we've done on the consultancy side of the firm that I wouldn't have even considered doing that way if one of our more junior kind of members of the team hadn't said, why are you doing it like this? Surely it's easier like, well, that's the way I want it to look, is quite often what you get, particularly from the clay layer. You said, well, what? And you get this, what are you trying to represent? Well, I want to present this information because, why don't you do it like that? And then all of a sudden you go, yeah, actually, I should be doing it like that because that's so much easier. And it's having that willingness to think about doing things differently rather than being dogmatic about them. I think that would really help.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you again so much to both Emily and Steve for giving us your time today. We've got one final slide and it's just about next steps. So for those of you who have been able to stay on with us, and I do apologise we've slightly gone over, but it's because we've got such great speakers and such great engagement. So what comes next after today is we're going to take away your questions and your insights to, as I said, to influence those 3 masterclasses around people, technology and clients. So please keep your eyes out for those invitations. The dates for your diary are on the screen there, and the first one is the People Masterclass, which I'll be running on Tuesday the 6th of July. Then we have the technology one, which is in September. We've skipped August to try and avoid school holidays so that we can get your maximum attendance. And then we have our final one on clients on Wednesday the 20th of October. So please put those dates in your diary and you will see the invites for those coming out very shortly. And those masterclasses are based upon the experiences and the Menti questions we've had today and other feedback, and they're going to be both insightful, very practical, hopefully inspiring, and also highly interactive. So it just goes for me to say thank you everybody for attending today. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and please contact us if you'd like any further information or if you've got any further questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you all.